The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of Silver Peak, Nevada, in the year 1877. The town had sprung up like a desert flower after rain, appearing almost overnight when prospectors discovered silver in the nearby mountains 3 years earlier. Now, wooden buildings lined both sides of Main Street, their false fronts making them look grander than they really were. Horses tied to hitching posts swished their tails at persistent flies, while the constant sound of hammering echoed from the stamp mill at the edge of town, where machinery crushed or to extract precious metal. At the heart of Silver Peak stood the Golden Slipper Saloon, a 2-story establishment that served as the town's social center, bank, courthouse, and rumor mill all rolled into one. Its swinging doors never stopped moving from dawn until well past midnight. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke, the smell of whiskey, and the sound of a slightly out-of-tune piano. Behind the Golden Slipper's mahogany bar stood Big Pete Morrison, a barrel-chested man with a graying beard and hands the size of dinner plates. He'd been a prospector once, until a cave-in crushed his leg and left him with a permanent limp. Now he served drinks and kept the peace, and he was good at both jobs. His shotgun, which everyone called the Peacemaker, rested within easy reach beneath the bar. But the real attraction at the Golden Slipper wasn't the whiskey or the card games or even Big Pete's famous yarns about the old days. It was the dance hall girls, particularly one named Rose McKenna. Rose wasn't the prettiest girl in Silver Peak. That honor belonged to Sarah Jane, the banker's daughter, with her porcelain skin and golden ringlets. Rose wasn't the youngest either. That was little Mary from the general store, barely 17. But Rose had something the others didn't. A spark in her green eyes that suggested she knew secrets worth knowing, and a smile that could make a man feel like he was the only person in the room. She was 23 years old, though she sometimes said 21 depending on who asked. Her auburn hair caught the lamplight like polished copper, and she wore it pinned up in elaborate styles that must have taken hours to arrange. Her dresses were fashionable but practical. She couldn't afford the latest Paris fashions, but she knew how to make a 3-year-old gown look fresh with the right ribbon or shawl. Rose had arrived in Silver Peak 2 years earlier on the weekly stagecoach, carrying a single carpet bag and wearing a traveling dress that had seen better days. She'd walked straight into the Golden Slipper and asked Big Pete for work. He'd been skeptical at first. Dance hall girls came and went like tumbleweeds, but something about her steady gaze convinced him to give her a chance. She'd proven herself worth 10 regular girls. Rose could dance with the minors and make them feel graceful, even when they stepped on her feet. She could listen to a cowboy's troubles and offer just the right words of comfort. She could defuse a fight with a joke or a well-timed song. And she never stole from the customers, never showed up drunk, and never caused drama with the other girls. But Rose had a secret. Every Tuesday afternoon, when the Golden Slipper was quiet, Rose would slip out the back door and disappear for exactly 2 hours. She'd return dusty and tired, sometimes with scratches on her hands, but she never explained where she'd been. Big Pete had asked once early on. She just smiled and said, "A girl's entitled to her mysteries, Pete." He hadn't asked again. What nobody in Silver Peak knew was that Rose McKenna was searching for something. Something that had brought her all the way from St. Louis, across prairies and deserts, following a trail that was already 5 years cold when she started. She was looking for the lost Dutchman's sister mine. To understand Rose's quest, you have to understand the legend of the Dutchman's gold. In the American West of the 1800s, gold fever was a real disease. Men left families, jobs, and common sense behind to chase rumors of untold riches. The California gold rush of 1849 was the most famous, but smaller rushes happened all over the West, in Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, Montana, and beyond. Towns would appear, boom with thousands of people, then vanish just as quickly when the gold ran out. Among prospectors, stories of lost mines were as common as sagebrush. Every region had its own legend, a mine so rich that gold could be scooped up by the handful, discovered by some lucky soul who then died or disappeared before he could relocate it. Most of these stories were nonsense, but they persisted because occasionally, just often enough, someone would stumble upon real treasure. The most famous legend was the Lost Dutchman mine in Arizona's Superstition Mountains. According to the story, a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz, called the Dutchman, though he was actually German, people often confused the two, discovered an incredibly rich gold mine somewhere in those treacherous mountains in the 1870s. He would periodically appear in Phoenix with high-grade or worth thousands of dollars, but he never revealed the mine's location. When he died in 1891, the secret died with him. Hundreds of people have searched for the Lost Dutchman mine since then. Some found nothing. Some died trying. But there was another legend, known to far fewer people, the Sister Mine. According to this story, Jacob Waltz had a partner in his early days of prospecting, an Irish immigrant named Michael McKenna. The two men had supposedly discovered not one but two rich deposits of gold ore. They agreed to work them separately to avoid attention. Waltz took the mine in the Superstition Mountains. McKenna took his mine, which was somewhere in Nevada, far to the north. The story went that McKenna worked his mine for 2 seasons, extracting enough gold to make him wealthy beyond imagining. But he was a cautious man, perhaps too cautious. He didn't trust banks, especially the rough frontier banks that could fail overnight or be robbed by outlaws. So he hid his gold, creating an elaborate system to protect it. Then, in 1872, Michael McKenna disappeared. Some said he'd been killed by claim jumpers. Others said he'd fallen down a shaft in his own mine. A few whispered that he'd taken his gold and fled to San Francisco or Mexico to start a new life. Whatever the truth, McKenna vanished, and his mine vanished with him. There was only one clue to its location: a map. According to the legend, McKenna had created a map to his mine and the location of his hidden gold. But being a careful man, he'd split the map into 3 pieces, giving one each to the 3 people he trusted most in the world: his wife, his brother, and his daughter. Michael McKenna's wife, Bridget, had died of tuberculosis in 1874, 2 years after her husband's disappearance. She'd taken her piece of the map to her grave, literally. It had been buried with her in a locket around her neck. McKenna's brother, Patrick, had gambled his piece away in a card game in San Francisco in 1875, and it had passed through a dozen hands since then. Its current location was anyone's guess. That left one piece, the section given to McKenna's daughter. Her name was Rose. On this particular scorching afternoon, Rose was performing her usual duties at the Golden Slipper. She'd just finished dancing with old Tom, a prospector who'd struck a modest vein of silver and liked to celebrate every Saturday by dancing until his legs gave out. She was laughing at one of his terrible jokes when the saloon doors swung open and a stranger walked in. In the Wild West, strangers were common. People drifted from town to town following work, opportunity, or trouble. But this stranger was different. He radiated danger the way a rattlesnake radiates warning. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with a lean build that suggested speed and strength. He wore black from head to toe: black hat, black vest, black trousers, black boots polished to a high shine despite the dusty streets. His face was weather-beaten and hard, with a scar running from his left eyebrow to his cheek. 2 Colt .45 revolvers hung low on his hips in tied-down holsters, marking him as a gunfighter. The Golden Slipper went quiet. Even the piano player stopped mid-tune. The man in black walked to the bar with measured steps, his spurs jingling softly. Every eye in the room tracked him. In the Old West, men who dressed like that were usually one of 3 things: lawmen, outlaws, or hired guns. Sometimes they were all 3 at different points in their careers. "Whiskey," the man said to Big Pete. His voice was surprisingly soft, with a slight southern drawl. "The good stuff, not the rotgut you serve the miners." Big Pete poured without comment, producing a bottle from beneath the bar that most customers never saw. The stranger picked up the glass and turned to face the room, leaning back against the bar. His eyes, cold and gray as a winter sky, swept across the crowd. They lingered for just a moment on Rose before moving on. That moment was enough. Rose felt a chill run down her spine despite the heat. "I'm looking for someone," the man announced. "A man named Samuel Crow. Anyone here know him?" Silence. Rose's hands, hidden in the folds of her skirt, began to tremble. Samuel Crow was the name her father had used when he wanted to travel incognito. It wasn't well known. She'd only discovered it herself by reading through her mother's old letters. How did the stranger know? "No? Nobody?" The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That's peculiar. Because I heard Samuel Crow spent considerable time in Silver Peak back in '72. Worked a claim somewhere in these hills. Made quite a strike from what I understand." "Mister," Big Pete said carefully, "we get a lot of prospectors through here. Can't remember them all." "Of course not." The stranger downed his whiskey and set the glass on the bar with a sharp click. "Then perhaps someone knows a Rose McKenna. I hear she's been asking questions about old mining claims. Particularly interested in claims from 1872. Rose forced herself to remain still, to keep her face neutral. But her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. One of the regular customers, a miner named Jake, spoke up. "We got a Rose here. She's one of the dance hall girls." The stranger's cold eyes found her again. "Is that so? Well, Miss Rose, I'd like a word with you. In private." "The lady doesn't have to go anywhere she doesn't want to," Big Pete said, his hand moving casually toward the shotgun beneath the bar. The man in black noticed the movement. His smile grew wider. I'm not here to cause trouble, friend. Just want to have a conversation. There's money in it for the lady if she's helpful. Rose knew she had two choices. She could refuse and make this man, whoever he was, more suspicious. Or she could face him and find out what he knew. Her father had always said that information was more valuable than gold. You couldn't spend information, but it could save your life. It's all right, Pete, Rose said, finding her voice. I'll speak with the gentleman. But we'll talk right here in the open. She led the stranger to a table in the corner, where they could talk quietly but remained in full view of the entire saloon. She sat with her back to the wall, another lesson from her father. Never sit where you can't see the door. The man settled into his chair with the grace of a predator. Smart girl. My name's Thomas Blackwell, though most people call me Black Tom. You heard of me? Rose had. Black Tom Blackwell was a notorious bounty hunter and hired gun. He was said to have killed 15 men in fair fights and had tracked outlaws from Texas to Montana. He wasn't evil exactly, he had a reputation for being honest in his own twisted way, but he was dangerous as dynamite. I've heard the name, Rose admitted. Good. Then you know I'm not a man to trifle with. I'm looking for information about Michael McKenna. I believe he was your father. There was no point in denying it. He was. He disappeared 5 years ago. I don't know where he is. But you're looking for him. Or at least for what he left behind. Black Tom leaned forward. Here's what I know, Miss Rose. Your father found himself a gold mine. A rich one. He pulled out enough to make himself wealthy, but he didn't trust banks. So he hid it. Then he vanished. I'm betting you've got a piece of a map that leads to that gold. And if I did? Rose kept her voice steady. Why would that interest you? I've been hired to find that gold. My employer is a patient man who's been piecing together information for years. He knows about the 3-piece map. He's already acquired one piece, the section that was gambled away in San Francisco. He wants the other 2 pieces. Who's your employer? That's not your concern. What matters is that he's willing to pay handsomely for your cooperation. $10,000 for your piece of the map. Plus a percentage of the gold once we find it. $10,000 was more money than Rose would earn in 10 years of dancing at the Golden Slipper. It was enough to buy a house, start a business, live comfortably for the rest of her life. But something in Black Tom's eyes told her that taking his offer would be a mistake. And if I refuse? Black Tom's expression didn't change. Then my employer will acquire your piece through less pleasant means. You're a smart woman, Miss Rose. You know how this works. You can take the money and walk away rich, or you can resist and end up with nothing. Possibly end up dead. I need time to think about it. You have until tomorrow night. Meet me here, same time with your answer. Black Tom stood, dropping a gold eagle on the table, $10, far more than the whiskey cost. That's for your time. And Miss Rose? Don't try to run. I'm very good at tracking people. He walked out of the Golden Slipper, leaving Rose sitting at the table with her mind racing. She'd known that searching for her father's gold would be dangerous. She'd known that others might be looking for it too. But she hadn't expected someone like Black Tom Blackwell. She needed help. And she needed it fast. Rose found Sheriff Jack Coleman in his office, a small wooden building that also served as the town jail. Jack was in his early 30s, tall and rangy, with sandy hair and blue eyes that could look either kind or hard, depending on the situation. He'd been a Texas Ranger before coming to Silver Peak, and he'd brought Ranger discipline and justice with him. He was cleaning his rifle when Rose knocked on the door frame. He looked up and immediately set the weapon aside. Rose, come in. What's wrong? How do you know something's wrong? Because you never come to see me during the day. Jack pulled out a chair for her. Also, you look scared and you don't scare easy. Rose had known Jack for almost as long as she'd been in Silver Peak. They developed an odd friendship, a dance hall girl and a lawman, 2 people who saw the town from different angles but both cared about keeping it civil. They'd never been romantic, though Rose sometimes caught him looking at her in a way that suggested he'd thought about it. She told him about Black Tom Blackwell and his offer. She told him about her father, about the map, about everything. It felt good to finally share the secret she'd been carrying alone for so long. Jack listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious with each revelation. When she finished, he sat back in his chair and whistled low. Rose McKenna. I should have guessed. Samuel Crow was your father. You knew him? Not personally, but I heard about him. There were rumors, back in '72, about a big strike near Silver Peak. Then Crow disappeared and the rumors died down. Most people figured it was just another tall tale. Jack rubbed his jaw. Black Tom Blackwell is bad news. If he's working for someone who wants that gold, they're serious about getting it. So what do I do? Well, you've got a few options. You could sell him the map piece and take the money. That's the safe play. But men like Black Tom's employer don't usually honor deals with people they consider beneath them. He might pay you or he might just take the map and leave you in a shallow grave. Also, you'd never forgive yourself for giving up on finding your father's treasure. Rose smiled despite her fear. Jack understood her better than she'd realized. Option 2, Jack continued, is you could run. I could get you on the next stagecoach out of Silver Peak. You'd be gone before Black Tom knew what happened. He said he's good at tracking people. He is. He'd find you eventually. But you'd buy yourself time. What's option 3? Jack met her eyes. You beat him to the gold. Find it before he does. Once it's in your hands, you have leverage to negotiate properly. But I only have one piece of the map. I'd need all 3 pieces to find the mine. Maybe not, Jack said. Your father was clever enough to hide his gold and create that map. But he was also your father. Is it possible he left you additional clues? Something personal that only you would understand. Rose thought about this. Her mother had given her the map piece on her deathbed, along with a locket containing a photograph of her father. There had also been a letter, but Rose had read it 100 times. It was just standard fatherly advice. Be honest, work hard, trust your instincts. Trust your instincts. There might be something, Rose said slowly. My father used to take me rock hunting when I was little. He taught me how to identify different minerals and ores. He said every rock had a story if you knew how to read it. That could be useful if you need to identify his mine. But there's more. He had favorite places where he'd take me. Places that were special to him. What if the mine is near one of those places? Jack leaned forward. Can you remember them? Some of them. There was a canyon with red rocks where Native Americans had left pictographs. There was a spring that ran year-round even in drought. And there was an old abandoned cabin that he said belonged to a hermit who died before we got there. Those are good leads. Better than nothing. Jack stood and retrieved a map from his desk, spreading it out on the table. It showed the area around Silver Peak, including topographical details of the surrounding mountains and valleys. Can you point out where these places might be? Rose studied the map. She'd been exploring the area around Silver Peak for 2 years, and some of the terrain looked familiar. She pointed to a canyon about 10 miles northeast of town. The pictograph canyon might be here. And the spring. She traced a line with her finger. Somewhere in this area. What about the cabin? Rose frowned. I'm not sure. I was only 7 or 8 when we visited it. But I remember we rode for most of a day to get there. Jack measured distances on the map with his fingers. In these mountains on horseback, you could cover 20 to 30 miles in a day. That gives us a search area, but it's still a lot of ground to cover. Wait. Rose closed her eyes, trying to pull up the old memory. I remember my father pointing out a distinctive rock formation. He said it looked like an eagle with spread wings. I made him stop so I could draw it. An eagle-shaped rock formation. Jack scanned the map. I might know what you're talking about. There's a formation up near Eagle Peak. He pointed to a spot about 25 miles north of Silver Peak, that old-timers call the Sentinel. It's an eagle-shaped rock standing alone on a ridge. Is that what you remember? Rose felt a surge of excitement. Yes, that could be it. Then we've got a place to start. Jack began rolling up the map. We'll need supplies for a few days in the wilderness. Food, water, camping gear, ammunition. And we need to leave without Black Tom knowing where we're headed. Rose looked at him in surprise. Jack, you don't have to do this. This is my problem. Wrong. Black Tom Blackwell made it my problem when he threatened a citizen of Silver Peak. That's my town and you're under my protection. He smiled. Besides, if there's really a gold mine out there, I'm entitled to a finder's fee. Sheriff's wages aren't that great. Despite everything, Rose laughed. Mercenary. Practical. Now, here's what we're going to do. They planned to leave before dawn, when the town was still asleep and Black Tom would likely be in his hotel room. Jack would tell his deputy that he was investigating reports of cattle rustling in the northern hills, a plausible excuse that wouldn't attract attention. Rose spent the evening preparing as if nothing unusual was happening. She danced with the regulars at the Golden Slipper, smiled and laughed at their jokes and gave no sign that anything was wrong. Black Tom appeared briefly watching her from the bar, but he didn't approach. He was waiting for tomorrow night, confident that she'd give him what he wanted. That confidence would be his mistake. At 3 in the morning, Rose slipped out of her room above the saloon with a small pack containing essentials. Her map piece, some clothes, her father's compass, and a small Derringer pistol she kept for protection. She changed into practical traveling clothes, trousers, boots, a shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat. In the frontier West, women wearing men's clothing wasn't as shocking as it was back east. Out here, practicality trumped propriety. Jack was waiting with 2 horses at the edge of town. One was his own mount, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Ranger. The other was a tough little Mustang mare that belonged to the livery stable. Jack had paid the owner double the rental fee to keep him quiet. They rode north into the darkness, navigating by starlight. The mountains loomed ahead of them, dark masses against the slightly lighter sky. Jack knew the trails well from his years of patrolling the territory, and he kept them moving at a steady pace that covered ground without exhausting the horses. As the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they stopped to rest and water the horses at a small creek. Rose pulled out the map piece her mother had given her. It was drawn on old parchment, brown with age, and showed what appeared to be a portion of the local geography. There were symbols that might represent landmarks. A cross that could be a mine entrance, a wavy line that might be a creek, and various markings that could be distances or directions. But without the other 2 pieces, it was impossible to tell how the sections fit together or what the complete picture showed. Your father really didn't want anyone finding this mine, Jack observed. He was protecting it. And protecting us. Rose traced the lines on the map. My mother told me that claim jumpers killed his friend Jacob Waltz's brother. After that, my father became very careful about who knew what. If the legend is true and your father really found gold like Waltz did, he had good reason to be careful. Jack checked the sun's position. We should keep moving. Black Tom will realize you're gone by this evening at the latest. Once he does, he'll come looking. They rode through the morning, following old prospector trails that wound through the mountains. The terrain was beautiful but harsh, rocky slopes dotted with pinyon pines and juniper trees, crossed by dry washes that would become raging torrents when the rare rain came. They saw wildlife, a golden eagle soaring on thermals, a mule deer watching them from a distance, a rattlesnake sunning itself on a rock which they gave a wide berth. By afternoon they'd reached Eagle Peak. The Sentinel Rock Formation stood exactly as Jack had described it, a tall spire of red sandstone that, from the right angle, looked remarkably like an eagle with outstretched wings. It was a striking landmark, visible for miles around. Now we look for the cabin, Rose said. They split up, riding in widening circles around the Sentinel, searching for any sign of human habitation. In the wilderness, abandoned structures could be surprisingly hard to spot. Weather and time wore them down. Vegetation grew over them. Desert claimed them back. It was Rose who found it, or rather what was left of it. In a small valley sheltered by high rocks, she discovered the remains of a log cabin. The roof had collapsed long ago and the walls were falling in, but the structure was unmistakable. Jack, she called out, and moments later he rode up beside her. They dismounted and approached carefully. Old cabins could be dangerous. Rotted floors, unstable walls, rattlesnakes making nests in the debris. But this cabin had collapsed so thoroughly that there wasn't much left to be dangerous. Just a pile of weathered logs and a stone chimney still standing like a monument. I remember this, Rose said softly. I played in that doorway while my father talked to the hermit. The old man gave me a piece of rock candy. The hermit's been gone a long time. Jack began searching the area around the cabin, looking for any sign of a mine entrance. If your father's mine was near here, where would he have hidden it? Rose closed her eyes, trying to remember. Her father had taken her rock hunting in this area, but where exactly? There had been an interesting rock formation, she remembered that. Something unusual that had caught her child's attention. Then it came to her, the rocks that looked like stairs. This way, she said suddenly, leading Jack away from the cabin and up a rocky slope. They climbed for 15 minutes, the horses following behind, until they reached a spot where natural erosion had created what looked like a series of giant steps leading up the mountainside. And there, hidden behind an outcropping that was invisible from below, was a dark opening in the rock. A mine entrance. The entrance was partially concealed by brush that had grown up over the years. Someone had clearly tried to disguise it. The branches were arranged too deliberately to be natural. Jack pulled them aside, revealing a timber-framed opening about 6 feet high and 4 feet wide. Just beyond the entrance, darkness swallowed everything. This could be it, Rose whispered, afraid to hope too much. Could be. or could be one of 100 played-out mines in these mountains. Jack examined the timbers carefully. But these supports are solid. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. In the mining boom of the late 1800s, mine safety was often an afterthought. Eager prospectors would dig into mountains with minimal support, creating dangerous shafts that could collapse at any moment. Thousands of miners died in cave-ins, a grim reality of the gold and silver rushes. But Michael McKenna had been an experienced miner, and it showed in the quality of the work. Jack took a coil of rope from his saddle, along with 2 lanterns and matches. Standard procedure: we tie ourselves together. If one of us falls or gets trapped, the other can pull them out. Always explore mines in pairs, never alone. They lit the lanterns, their flickering light pushing back the darkness just enough to see a few feet ahead. The mine tunnel descended at a gentle angle, the floor covered with rock dust and small stones. The walls showed pick marks where someone had worked systematically, following a vein of quartz that glittered in the lantern light. Stay close, Jack instructed. Watch for unstable ground, sudden drops, and old dynamite. Sometimes miners would set charges that didn't explode. They can still be dangerous decades later. They moved forward slowly, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. The air was cool and still, carrying a mineral smell mixed with dampness. Rose's heart was pounding. This could be it, her father's mine, the place he'd worked in secret, the source of the gold he'd hidden. The tunnel continued for about 50 feet, then branched into a T-intersection. To the left, the passage appeared to dead end after a short distance. To the right, it continued deeper into the mountain. Which way? Jack asked. Rose consulted her map piece, but in the lantern light, the symbols seemed to dance and blur. She tried to orient herself, to match the lines on the map with the physical reality around her, but it was impossible to be sure. Right, she decided, trusting her instincts as her father had taught her. They turned right and continued deeper. The tunnel here was narrower, forcing them to proceed single file. Jack went first, holding his lantern high. Rose followed, her own lantern casting dancing shadows on the walls. After another 100 feet, they emerged into a larger chamber, a natural cave that had been expanded by mining. And there, in the center of the chamber, they saw it: gold. Not just traces of gold in quartz veins, which would have been impressive enough. This was a seam of almost pure gold or running through the rock like a frozen river. It glittered in the lantern light, more yellow-orange gold than white gold, indicating high purity. Rose had learned from her father that the color of gold or could tell you its quality. The deeper the yellow, the richer the gold content. My God, Jack breathed. The legend was true. Rose approached the gold seam with shaking hands. She touched it gently, almost reverently. Her father had found this. He'd stood in this very spot, held his lantern up to see this same incredible sight. She felt connected to him across the years, across the mystery of his disappearance. But where was the gold he'd already mined? Jack, help me search. The gold my father extracted should be here somewhere. He wouldn't have moved it far, too dangerous. They began systematically examining the chamber, looking for any sign of hidden storage. Rose remembered her father's cleverness with hiding places. Once he'd hidden her birthday present inside a hollowed-out book. Another time he'd concealed his savings in a false bottom of his desk drawer. She was examining the walls when her foot struck something hollow-sounding. She looked down and noticed that the floor in one corner appeared different. The rocks were smaller and more uniform, as if they'd been placed rather than natural. Jack, over here. Together they began clearing the rocks away. Beneath them was a wooden trapdoor, so cleverly disguised that they'd walked over it twice without noticing. Jack pried it open with his knife, revealing a cavity about 4 feet deep. Inside were canvas bags. Lots of them. Jack pulled one out and loosened the drawstring. Gold coins spilled into his hand, double eagles, each worth $20. He dumped the coins back into the bag and checked its weight. This bag alone must have 50 pounds of gold coins. There are. He counted quickly, at least 20 bags here. Rose, there must be half a ton of gold in this hole. Half a ton of gold. At the 1877 price of about $20 per troy ounce, and with gold weighing about 14 ounces per pound, troy ounces are slightly different from regular ounces. That meant? Rose's mind spun trying to calculate it. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe more than $1 million in today's money. Her father had been more successful than she'd imagined. But even as excitement flooded through her, practical concerns surfaced. We can't move this. Not all of it. Not quickly. Each bag weighs 50 pounds, we'd need pack horses multiple trips. And we don't have time, Jack finished. Black Tom will be tracking us. We need to. He stopped suddenly, his hand going to his gun. Do you hear that? Rose froze, listening. From somewhere deeper in the mine came a sound, rock scraping against rock, echoing through the tunnels. Someone else was in the mine with them. Put out your lantern, Jack whispered urgently. Rose obeyed immediately, plunging her side of the chamber into darkness. Jack shuddered his own lantern to just a thin beam of light, then positioned himself behind a rock outcropping with his gun drawn. They waited in tense silence. The scraping sound came again, closer this time, accompanied by footsteps and the faint glow of approaching lamplight. Rose's hand found the derringer in her pocket. It was a small gun, only 2 shots, but better than nothing. 2 figures emerged from the tunnel, but they weren't Black Tom. The first was a young man, maybe 19 or 20, with shaggy dark hair and sun-browned skin. He wore simple miner's clothes and carried a pickaxe over his shoulder. His face showed surprise when Jack's lantern beam hit him. The second figure made Rose gasp. It was a Native American woman, probably in her 60s, wearing traditional buckskin clothing. Her long gray hair was braided, and her dark eyes were sharp and intelligent. Most surprising was that the young man was supporting her. She seemed to be injured, favoring her left leg. Don't shoot, the young man said immediately, raising his free hand. We're not here to cause trouble. Then explain what you are doing in this mine, Jack said, not lowering his gun. I could ask you the same thing, Sheriff. The young man's eyes were steady. This mine's been abandoned for years. Figured nobody'd mind if we took shelter here. Shelter from what? From the men who are hunting us. The old woman spoke for the first time, her English accented but clear. The same men who are hunting her. She nodded toward Rose. Rose stepped into the lamplight. How do you know someone's hunting me? The old woman smiled slightly. Because I know who you are, Rose McKenna, daughter of Michael McKenna. And I know about the map. Jack kept his gun trained on them but gestured for Rose to stay back. Start talking. Who are you and how do you know about the map? The young man helped the old woman sit on a rock ledge. My name's Daniel Whitehorse. This is my grandmother, Sarah Whitehorse. We're Paiute. Our people have lived in these mountains for centuries, long before the miners came. Your grandmother's hurt, Rose observed, her natural compassion overriding her caution. We were being chased. She fell climbing down a ravine. I think her ankle's broken. Daniel looked worried. I brought her here because I knew about this mine. My father worked it briefly with a man named Samuel Crow, Michael McKenna, back in 1872. Rose's heart leaped. Your father knew my father? They were friends, Sarah said. More than friends, partners. Michael couldn't work this mine alone. He needed someone he could trust, someone who knew these mountains. He hired my son, Daniel's father, John Whitehorse. Together they extracted gold from this mine for 2 seasons. Jack lowered his gun slightly. If that's true, what happened to John Whitehorse? Sarah's face darkened. He died. 5 years ago, the same night Michael disappeared. They were attacked by men who wanted the mine's location. John and Michael fought them off, but John was killed. Michael escaped, but he was badly wounded. I don't know if he survived. Rose felt tears sting her eyes. Her father might be dead. She'd known it was possible, even likely, but hearing it confirmed was different. My grandmother has been protecting this mine ever since, Daniel continued, making sure nobody found it. She's the one who's been moving the branches to hide the entrance, keeping people away. But how do you know about the map? Rose asked. Because Michael gave my father a piece of it too, Sarah said. For safekeeping. He didn't trust that 3 pieces would be enough. He made a 4th piece, a copy of the center section where all 3 parts connect. He gave it to John, told him to protect it and give it to Michael's daughter if anything happened to him. You have the 4th piece? Rose could hardly believe it. Sarah nodded. Hidden in a safe place. But now men are coming who will torture us for it. The same kind of men who killed my son. Black Tom Blackwell, Jack said. He got to you somehow. Figured out the connection. We were careful, Daniel said bitterly. But someone in Silver Peak must have talked. An old prospector who remembered seeing my father with Michael McKenna. 2 days ago, men came to our camp asking questions. When we wouldn't answer, they tried to take my grandmother by force. We've been running ever since. How many men? Jack asked. 3 that I saw. Plus the one in black who seems to be their leader. Black Tom doesn't usually work with a gang, Jack said thoughtfully. Which means whoever hired him is serious enough to bring backup. They're not just looking for gold, they want to make sure nobody else gets it. Rose made a decision. Sarah, Daniel, We need to work together. We all want the same thing, to keep this gold safe and honor my father's wishes. If we combine our map pieces, we can figure out where my father hid the gold he already mined. Some of it's here. Jack pointed to the trapdoor in the floor. Sarah shook her head. That's not even a quarter of what Michael extracted. He moved most of it before the attack. Said he was creating a treasure vault, somewhere safer. John helped him, but Michael never told him where it was. Said it was better if only he knew. Then the complete map must show the vault's location, Rose said. Sarah, we need that fourth piece. It's hidden at the Pictograph Canyon in a place sacred to my people. I'll tell you how to find it. Sarah winced as she shifted her injured ankle. But we don't have much time. Those men are tracking us. They'll find this mine eventually. As if her words had summoned them, they heard it, the distant sound of horses and men's voices echoing through the mountains. They're here, Daniel said, moving to the tunnel entrance to listen. Maybe half a mile away, coming up the valley. Jack's mind was already working. We need a plan. We can't fight 3 armed men plus Black Tom in the open. But if we can hold this mine entrance, we have a defensive position. There's another way out, Sarah said. The mine has a second entrance, a natural cave opening about 200 yards deeper into the mountain. It's hidden and difficult to find, but it leads to a different valley. Perfect. Jack turned to Daniel. Take your grandmother and Rose out through the back entrance. Get to the Pictograph Canyon and retrieve that map piece. I'll hold them here as long as I can. Jack, no, Rose protested. You can't face 4 men alone. I'm not facing them, I'm just slowing them down. I'll fire a few shots, make them think we're all here defending the mine, then slip out the back way myself. By the time they work up the courage to storm the entrance, we'll all be gone. And the gold? Daniel asked, looking at the bags in the floor. We leave it. Gold doesn't matter if we're dead. Jack was already moving, gathering rocks to create a defensive position near the entrance. Rose, give me 5 minutes to set up, then get moving. Sarah, tell them how to find the second exit. The old woman gave quick directions. Follow the main tunnel deeper until it forked, take the left path, look for a natural chimney of rock that would lead upward to daylight. It would be a difficult climb, especially with Sarah's injured ankle, but it was their only option. Outside, the voices were getting louder. Black Tom was coordinating his men, sending them to surround the area. Professional and methodical, just as dangerous as his reputation suggested. Go, Jack commanded. Now. Rose wanted to argue, wanted to stay and fight beside him, but she knew he was right. The map piece was more important than pride. She helped Daniel support his grandmother, and together they retreated deeper into the mine. Behind them, Jack's rifle cracked once, twice, warning shots echoing through the mountain like thunder. The battle for the gold mine had begun. The climb out of the mine was harrowing. The natural chimney Sarah had described was barely wide enough for one person at a time, with rough walls that tore at their clothes and hands. Rose went first, finding handholds in the dark rock and calling back instructions. Daniel came last, essentially pushing his grandmother upward while she gritted her teeth against the pain in her ankle. Behind them, they could hear the muffled sounds of gunfire. Jack was holding his position, making Black Tom's gang think twice about charging the mine entrance. But how long could he hold out? After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 15 minutes, Rose's reaching hand found empty air instead of rock. She pulled herself up and out into blessed daylight, finding herself on a rocky hillside hidden by juniper trees and boulders. The landscape stretched out below, a different valley than the one they'd entered from, just as Sarah had said. She reached down to help pull Sarah up, then Daniel. They collapsed on the hillside, breathing hard. The horses, Rose said suddenly. We left them at the front entrance. Jack will take care of them, Daniel assured her. Right now we need to move. If Black Tom's men split up to search, they could find this exit. Sarah pointed toward the northeast, where a canyon cut through the red rock like a knife wound. The Pictograph Canyon. 2 miles. They started moving, Daniel supporting his grandmother while Rose scouted ahead. The terrain was rough, all rocks and sparse vegetation with no clear trail. They had to pick their way carefully, always aware that they might be spotted from below. The sun was past its zenith now, probably 3 or 4 in the afternoon. They had maybe 4 hours of daylight left. After that, traveling through this wilderness would become extremely dangerous. Easy to get lost, easy to take a fall in the dark, easy to stumble onto a rattlesnake or into a ravine. Rose's mind kept returning to Jack, alone in the mine. Had he escaped? Was he hurt? The uncertainty gnawed at her. They were halfway to the canyon when Daniel suddenly grabbed Rose's arm and pulled her down behind a boulder. "Riders," he whispered. "Two of them down in the valley." Rose peered carefully around the boulder. Two men on horseback were moving slowly through the valley below, searching. They were too far away to identify, but they had to be part of Black Tom's gang. "They're between us and the canyon," Daniel observed. "We'll have to wait until they pass or find another route." "We don't have time for another route," Sarah said quietly. "There's a shortcut. Dangerous but faster. Through the Slot Canyon." She pointed to a narrow cleft in the rocks that Rose hadn't even noticed. It looked barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. "Slot canyons are death traps if it rains," Daniel said. "And my grandmother can't climb with that ankle." "I can if I must." Sarah's voice was firm. "And it won't rain. Look at the sky. Clear as crystal." In the desert southwest, flash floods were one of the greatest dangers. A thunderstorm miles away could send a wall of water rushing through a slot canyon without warning, drowning anyone caught inside. Hundreds of people had died that way over the years. But Sarah was right. The sky was cloudless and the air was dry. The risk was minimal. "All right," Rose decided. "The Slot Canyon it is." They approached the narrow opening carefully. It was even tighter than it looked. Rose had to turn sideways and suck in her breath to fit through. The walls of stone rose 15 feet on either side, smooth and polished by ancient floods. Above was just a thin strip of sky. Inside, the temperature dropped noticeably. The sun never reached the bottom of these canyons, and the stone held the cool of night. It was like walking through a stone tunnel, one that twisted and turned unpredictably. They moved as quickly as they dared, Rose leading the way, Daniel helping his grandmother navigate the uneven floor. In some places, the canyon narrowed so much they had to turn completely sideways. In others, it opened into small chambers where ancient floodwaters had carved out the softer stone. After about 15 minutes of squeezing through the Slot Canyon, they emerged into the Pictograph Canyon proper, a wider space where thousand-year-old rock art covered the walls. The petroglyphs showed human figures, animals, geometric patterns, and symbols whose meanings had been lost to time. The ancestral Puebloan people and later the Paiute had left their marks here, creating a gallery of ancient stories. "There," Sarah said, pointing to a section of wall where a spiral pattern had been carved into the rock. "Behind the spiral, there's a crack in the stone. Reach inside, you'll find a leather pouch." Rose approached the spiral carefully. The rock art was sacred, and she felt like an intruder disturbing something holy. But this was what her father had wanted. Sarah's son had helped him, had earned this trust. She found the crack exactly where Sarah described it. Reaching inside, her fingers touched leather. She pulled out a small pouch, weathered but intact. Inside was a piece of parchment, folded and protected by the pouch. The fourth piece of the map. Rose unfolded it carefully. This piece showed what appeared to be the center section where the other three pieces would connect. It had markings she didn't recognize, letters and numbers that might be coordinates or distances. But most importantly, it had a clear X marking a specific location. "We need to get all four pieces together," Rose said. "Then we can figure out where the treasure vault is." "First we need to survive," Daniel said, moving to the canyon entrance to stand watch. "Those riders will figure out we went through the Slot Canyon eventually. And we need to find Jack," Rose added. "We can't leave him behind." Sarah sat down heavily on a rock, her face pale with pain. "Daniel, child, you need to bind my ankle properly. We wrapped it in haste, but it needs better support if I'm to keep walking." While Daniel tended to his grandmother, using strips torn from his shirt to create a more stable binding, Rose studied the map piece. The X was marked in what looked like the mountains east of Silver Peak, maybe 15 miles from where they were now. There were symbols around it that might indicate landmarks, but without the other pieces for context, it was hard to be sure. She was so focused on the map that she almost didn't hear it, a soft sound like a pebble rolling down rock. But Daniel heard it. His hand went to the knife at his belt, his body tensing. "Someone's coming." They all froze listening. Footsteps, careful and quiet, approaching from the direction they'd come. One person moving slowly. Rose pulled out her derringer, her hands shaking slightly. The canyon entrance was the only way in or out. They were trapped if the newcomer was hostile. A figure appeared at the entrance, silhouetted against the bright sky beyond. Tall, wearing a hat, moving with the careful gait of someone expecting trouble. "Don't shoot," a familiar voice said. "It's me." Jack Coleman stepped into the canyon, and Rose felt relief wash over her so intensely she almost dropped her gun. "Jack, how did you?" "Followed your trail. You three aren't as stealthy as you think." He was dusty and looked tired, but he seemed uninjured. Black Tom's men stormed the mine about 10 minutes after you left. I held them off with the rifle, made them cautious, then slipped out the back way like I planned. Found your horses and brought them partway here, left them hidden in a grove about half a mile back. Did Black Tom see which way you went? Don't think so. I laid a false trail heading south, made it look like we all went that direction. It'll buy us a few hours, maybe less. Jack noticed the map piece in Rose's hand. You found it? We did. Now we need to put all 4 pieces together and figure out where my father's treasure vault is hidden. Jack nodded. Then we'd better get to work. We've got maybe 2 hours before Black Tom realizes he's following a false trail and backtracks to find our real route. After that, he'll be hunting us in earnest and we'll be out of time. They gathered in the shade of the pictograph wall, spreading the map pieces out on a flat rock. Rose had her piece, the section her mother had given her. Sarah had retrieved the piece Michael McKenna had entrusted to her husband. That left 2 pieces missing, the section that had been gambled away in San Francisco, now presumably in Black Tom's employer's possession, and the piece that was buried with Rose's mother. Wait, Rose said, a thought occurring to her. My mother was buried with her piece in a locket around her neck. But what if I have that piece too? She pulled out her own locket, the one her mother had given her on her deathbed. Rose had assumed it contained only her father's photograph, but now she opened it with trembling fingers. Behind the photograph was a thin piece of parchment, folded so small it was barely noticeable. The 3rd piece of the map. She wanted me to have both pieces, Rose whispered. She knew I'd come looking. She was preparing me all along. With 3 of the 4 pieces, they had most of the puzzle. Rose laid them out carefully, trying different arrangements until they fit together. The wavy lines aligned, showing that they represented a river, probably the Carson River that ran through the region. The symbols began to make sense. A triangle for mountains, a cross for mine entrances, a star for the treasure vault. But we're still missing the piece Black Tom's employer has, Daniel pointed out. Without it, we don't have the complete picture. Maybe we don't need it, Jack said. He'd been studying the 3 pieces with the practiced eye of someone who'd read many maps during his ranger days. Look, your 3 pieces form the outer edge of the map. The piece Black Tom has is the center, the part Sarah's piece overlaps with. We can extrapolate from context. He pointed to the markings on Sarah's piece. These numbers are distances in miles. This symbol here, he indicated a small drawing that looked like 2 peaks. That's Twin Peaks, a landmark about 20 miles east of Silver Peak. And this line running from the mine to the star, that's a bearing, probably magnetic north, adjusted for local variation. Rose felt a surge of hope. Can you figure out where the vault is? Jack pulled out his own map of the region and began comparing it to the 3 pieces of Michael McKenna's map. He made notes in the dust with his finger, calculated angles, measured distances. The vault should be. He traced a line on his map, somewhere in this area. There's an old Spanish mission ruin there, abandoned 100 years ago. It's remote, rarely visited. Makes sense as a hiding place. The mission San Rafael de las Montañas, Sarah said. Yes, the old mission. My people called it the Stone House. It was built by Spanish priests in the 1770s, abandoned when they couldn't convert enough natives to make it worthwhile. It's mostly collapsed now, but some walls still stand. That's got to be it, Rose said excitedly. My father would have known about the mission. He studied history, loved old ruins. It's exactly the kind of place he'd choose. It's also 20 miles from here, Jack said. That's a full day's ride, maybe more in this terrain. And we'd have to cross open country where Black Tom could spot us easily. We don't have a choice, Rose said firmly. We've come too far to turn back now. Daniel helped his grandmother to her feet. I'm coming with you. My father died protecting this secret. I want to see it through. Your grandmother needs medical attention, Jack pointed out. That ankle needs to be set properly by a doctor. Then Rose and I will go to the mission, Daniel said. You take my grandmother back to Silver Peak, get her to the doctor and organize help. Deputize some men you trust. When you find Black Tom, you'll have the law on your side. It was a sensible plan, but Rose could see Jack didn't like it. He wanted to be there when they found the treasure vault, and he wanted to protect Rose personally. But duty came first. Sarah needed help, and Jack needed to deal with Black Tom legally if possible. All right, Jack agreed reluctantly. But you two be careful. Don't take any unnecessary risks. If you find the vault, don't go inside alone. Wait for me to catch up. Old Spanish missions can be dangerous, especially if they've been abandoned for a century. They made their plans quickly. Jack would take Sarah back to Silver Peak by the fastest route, staying off the main trails to avoid Black Tom's men. Rose and Daniel would circle east toward the mission, traveling at night when possible to avoid detection. They'd meet at the mission in 2 days. Before they parted, Jack pulled Rose aside. "I want you to take this." He handed her his spare revolver, a Colt .45. "The Derringer is good for close range, but you need something with more stopping power. Do you know how to use one?" Rose nodded. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was young, said every frontier woman should know how to protect herself. She checked the revolver, familiarizing herself with its weight and balance. "Be careful," Jack said quietly. "Black Tom is dangerous, but he's not the real threat. Whoever hired him, whoever wants this gold badly enough to kill for it, they're the ones you need to worry about. Do you know who it might be?" "I have suspicions. There's a mining syndicate out of San Francisco that's been buying up claims in Nevada. They're ruthless, willing to do whatever it takes to acquire profitable mines. If they got wind of your father's strike." Jack shook his head. "Just watch yourself." Rose touched his arm. "You too. And thank you, Jack. For everything." For a moment, their eyes met, and Rose saw something in his gaze that went beyond friendship or duty. But this wasn't the time to explore those feelings. They had a mission to complete, and danger was closing in from all sides. Jack and Sarah headed southwest toward Silver Peak, while Rose and Daniel turned east toward the old Spanish mission and the secrets it might hold. They traveled through the afternoon and into the evening, leading the horses when the terrain got too rough to ride. The landscape was harsh but beautiful, red rock formations carved by wind and water, dotted with desert plants that had evolved to survive with almost no rainfall. Rose saw a roadrunner sprint across their path, and once they spotted a golden eagle's nest high on a cliff face. As darkness fell, they made a cold camp in a sheltered canyon. They didn't dare light a fire, which might be visible for miles. Instead, they ate jerky and hardtack from Jack's saddlebags and shared water from their canteens. "Tell me about your father," Daniel said as they sat in the darkness. "What was he like?" Rose smiled, remembering. "He was curious about everything. Always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. He'd spend hours examining rocks, explaining to me about minerals and geology. He said the earth was like a book if you knew how to read it." "He sounds like a good man." He was. But he was also secretive. There were parts of his past he never talked about. My mother said he'd seen hard times before he met her, things that haunted him. I think that's why he was so careful about the gold mine. He'd learned not to trust easily. My father was the same, Daniel said. He'd lived through the Indian Wars, seen his people forced off their traditional lands. When Michael McKenna offered him honest work and treated him like an equal, it meant everything. That's why he protected the secret even after Michael disappeared. They fell silent, each lost in thoughts of fathers they'd lost too soon. At dawn they were moving again. By mid-morning they spotted it in the distance, the ruins of Mission San Rafael de las Montañas. The mission had been built in a valley between two mesas, a strategic location that provided water from a nearby spring and protection from wind. The Spanish priests had chosen well but not well enough. The mission had failed and nature was slowly reclaiming it. Most of the structure had collapsed, leaving only scattered walls and rubble. But the main chapel was still partially intact, its thick adobe walls defying time. A bell tower stood at one corner, though the bell itself was long gone. The whole place had an air of melancholy, of dreams abandoned and prayers unanswered. Rose and Daniel approached cautiously, watching for any sign that someone else had been there recently. But they saw no fresh tracks, no disturbed ground. If Black Tom had figured out where they were going, he hadn't arrived yet. They tied their horses in the shade of a ruined wall and began searching. The mission compound had been larger than it first appeared. There were remains of priests' quarters, a storage building, even a small graveyard where wooden crosses had rotted away to nothing. Where would your father hide a treasure vault? Daniel wondered aloud. Rose thought about what she knew of her father's character. He would want somewhere secure, somewhere that would last, somewhere with multiple layers of protection. Not just a hole in the ground but something more clever. "The chapel," she said. "It's the strongest structure still standing. And Spanish missions usually had crypts beneath them, for burying important priests." They entered the chapel through a doorway that had lost its door long ago. Inside, the roof had partially collapsed, letting in shafts of sunlight that illuminated floating dust. There had once been an altar, but scavengers had carried it away. The floor was dirt and broken tiles, covered in debris from the fallen roof. Rose and Daniel began carefully clearing away the rubble, searching for any sign of a crypt entrance. Spanish colonial crypts were usually accessed through a trapdoor in the floor or a hidden stairway behind the altar area. It was Rose who found it, a section of floor that sounded hollow when she tapped it with a rock. They cleared away more debris and discovered a stone slab with an iron ring set into it. The ring was rusted but still functional. Together they hauled on the ring. The stone slab was incredibly heavy, requiring all their combined strength to move it even a few inches. But slowly, grudgingly, it shifted, revealing stone steps leading down into darkness. "I'll get a lantern," Daniel said. While he retrieved their supplies from the horses, Rose peered down into the darkness. She could smell damp earth and old stone. How long had it been since anyone entered this crypt? 100 years? More? Daniel returned with a lantern and matches. They lit the lantern carefully. In these old ruins, there could be pockets of bad air that would either snuff out flames or explode when ignited. But the lamp burned steadily, indicating the air was safe enough. "Ladies first," Daniel offered with a slight smile. "How chivalrous," Rose said, but she was already starting down the steps. The stairs descended about 15 feet, ending in a small underground chamber. The walls were made of fitted stone, and niches had been carved into them to hold the remains of the dead. Most were empty now, either they'd never been used or scavengers had disturbed them long ago. But at the far end of the crypt was something that definitely hadn't been there when the Spanish built it. A wooden door new enough that it couldn't be more than a few years old. "That has to be it," Rose breathed. The door was locked with a heavy padlock. Rose examined it in the lantern light and felt her heart sink. They didn't have the key, and picking locks was a skill she'd never learned. But Daniel had a more direct solution. He produced a small crowbar from his pack. Sometimes the simple approach is best. He wedged the crowbar between the door and its frame and began prying. The wood was solid, but the frame was mortared into old stone that had been weakened by time. After a few minutes of work, the frame began to give way. With a final heave, Daniel pulled the entire lock assembly free of the crumbling mortar. The door swung open. Beyond was a small room, maybe 10 feet square, carved out of the solid rock beneath the mission. And stacked against the walls were more canvas bags, dozens of them. Rose entered slowly, almost afraid to believe it. She untied one of the bags and looked inside. Gold coins just like in the mine. But also gold bars, jewelry, raw nuggets. A fortune in precious metal, all gleaming in the lamplight. "My father did this," Rose said, her voice echoing in the small chamber. "He created all this, hid it here, protected it. And he never got to come back for it." "What do you want to do with it?" Daniel asked. It was a fair question. This gold could make Rose wealthy beyond imagination. She could live in luxury, never work another day in her life. She could return to St. Louis in triumph, could thumb her nose at everyone who'd looked down on a dance hall girl. But as she looked at the gold, Rose realized she didn't want those things. She wanted something else: justice for her father, security for her future, and the satisfaction of completing what he'd started. "I want to claim it legally," she said. "File the proper papers, pay the taxes, do it right. My father's mining claim should still be valid if we can prove it was his. This gold is part of that claim. I want it to be legitimate." "And Black Tom?" "His employer. They have no legal right to this gold. None. It was my father's find, my father's work. They're just thieves trying to steal it." Rose's voice hardened with determination. "We'll defend it. With the law's help if possible, without it if necessary." Daniel nodded approvingly. "My grandmother would say you have a warrior's spirit." They began taking inventory of the treasure vault, counting bags and estimating weights. Based on their calculations, Michael McKenna had hidden nearly 2 tons of gold in the mission crypt. The current value would be staggering, easily over $1 million, possibly much more. They were so focused on their counting that they almost missed the sound. Horses approaching and men's voices. Black Tom had found them. Rose and Daniel extinguished the lantern immediately and moved to the stairs. From the crypt entrance they could see shadows moving in the ruined chapel above. At least 3 men, possibly more. "Tracks lead right here," a voice was saying. "They're in the mission somewhere." "Search every building," came Black Tom's distinctive soft drawl. "They can't have gotten far. And find that gold. My employer is losing patience." Rose and Daniel retreated back down into the treasure vault. They were trapped. There was only one way out, and Black Tom's men were between them and freedom. "We need a plan," Daniel whispered urgently. Rose looked around the vault, her mind racing. They had gold, 2 guns, her Colt .45 and Daniel's revolver. One knife and the element of surprise. Black Tom didn't know yet that they'd found the vault. Then she noticed something she'd missed before. The vault had ventilation. There were narrow shafts built into the rock, probably to keep the air fresh in the crypt. One of them was larger than the others, roughly 2 feet square. "Can you fit through that?" Rose asked Daniel, pointing to the shaft. He examined it doubtfully. "Maybe." "Where does it lead?" "Only one way to find out. If you can get through, you could circle around behind them, create a distraction. I'll defend the entrance from here. I'm not leaving you alone to face 4 armed men. You won't be leaving me, you'll be flanking them." Classic military tactics. My father taught me about Civil War battles. The side that controls multiple positions wins. Rose tried to sound more confident than she felt. Before Daniel could argue further, they heard footsteps on the stone stairs. Someone was coming down. "Hide," Rose hissed, pushing Daniel toward the ventilation shaft. She positioned herself behind the door, gun drawn, heart pounding so hard she thought it would give her away. A man appeared at the bottom of the stairs, holding a torch. He wasn't Black Tom. This was one of the hired guns, a rough-looking character with a scarred face and missing front teeth. He saw the open door to the vault and grinned. "Found it, boss?" he called up the stairs. "The gold's here." He started toward the vault and Rose made her move. She stepped out and aimed the Colt at his chest. "Drop the gun." The man froze, his hand hovering over his holster. For a moment Rose thought he might comply. Then his face twisted into a sneer. "You ain't gonna shoot me, little girl? Dance hall girls don't have the..." Rose shot him in the leg. The Colt's roar was deafening in the confined space, and the man went down screaming. Rose had aimed for his thigh, deliberately missing major arteries. She wanted to disable him, not kill him. Even in the Wild West, unnecessary killing could land you in jail or worse. But the gunshot had announced her position to everyone above. Within seconds she heard running feet and shouted orders. "Get down there. She's in the crypt." Rose quickly pulled the wounded man into the vault and slammed the door. It wouldn't hold long, but it might by precious seconds. She looked around frantically for Daniel, but he'd already squeezed into the ventilation shaft and was gone. She was alone. The door shuddered as someone threw their weight against it. Once, twice, 3 times. Rose braced herself against it, but she knew it wouldn't hold. The door was old, and the lock was already damaged from when Daniel had pried it open. "Last chance." Black Tom's voice called from the other side. "Come out now and nobody else gets hurt. You can keep a percentage of the gold. That's fair, isn't it?" "Nothing about this is fair," Rose shouted back. "This gold belonged to my father. You have no right to it. Your father's dead, girl. Has been for 5 years. The gold just sits here doing nobody any good. My employer will put it to productive use, investing it, building businesses, creating jobs. That's better than having it rot in a hole, isn't it?" "Who is your employer?" Rose demanded, still bracing the door. Pause. Then, Solomon Drake. He owns the Drake Mining Consortium. Richest man in Nevada, maybe in the whole West. He's the one who hired me to track down your father's gold. He already has one piece of the map, bought it fair and square from a gambler in San Francisco. Now he wants the rest. And what Solomon Drake wants, he gets. Rose knew that name. Solomon Drake was indeed one of the wealthiest men in the West, but his reputation was dark. He'd made his fortune by destroying competitors, by acquiring mining claims through intimidation and violence, by treating workers like disposable tools. If he got control of her father's gold and mine, he'd use it to gain even more power. "Never," Rose said firmly. "I'll die before I let Solomon Drake have my father's gold." "That can be arranged," Black Tom said, and his voice had lost all pretense of friendliness. "Boys, break down that door." The pounding intensified. Rose looked around desperately for anything she could use to strengthen her position. Then she noticed the bags of gold, hundreds of pounds of metal. Working frantically, she began stacking the bags against the door, creating a barrier. It wouldn't stop bullets, but it would make the door much harder to force open. She worked with desperate speed, dragging heavy bags into position even as the door shuddered under repeated impacts. She just placed the last bag when something unexpected happened. Gunshots from above, outside the chapel. A lot of them. The pounding on the door stopped. "What the..." Black Tom's voice, followed by running feet and more gunfire. Rose waited, hardly daring to breathe. What was happening up there? Had Daniel somehow gotten out and attacked from behind? But it sounded like more than one gun firing. It sounded like a small army. Then she heard a voice that made her heart leap with relief. "This is Sheriff Jack Coleman. You men are under arrest. Throw down your weapons." Jack had returned and he'd brought help. The gunfight lasted only a few minutes, but to Rose, crouched in the dark vault behind her barricade of gold, it felt like hours. She heard shouts, curses, the crack of rifles and the boom of shotguns echoing through the ruined mission. Then gradually the shooting stopped. "Rose?" Jack's voice calling down into the crypt. "Rose, are you all right?" She scrambled over the gold bags and pushed the door open. "I'm here. I'm fine." She climbed the stairs to find the chapel full of men. Jack was there, along with his deputy and half a dozen armed citizens of Silver Peak, miners and shopkeepers who'd answered the sheriff's call to help defend one of their own against claim jumpers. Black Tom and his men were on the ground, disarmed and under guard. The gunfighter's face was dark with fury, but he'd surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. In the Old West, even the most dangerous outlaws understood when the odds were against them. Daniel emerged from the ruins outside, dusty and grinning. The ventilation shaft led to an old well. "I climbed out just as the sheriff arrived. Perfect timing." "How did you know to come?" Rose asked Jack. "I got Sarah back to town and to the doctor. While I was organizing a posse, a telegram arrived from the marshal in San Francisco. Turns out someone had tipped them off about Solomon Drake's illegal activities, bribery, claim jumping, hiring criminals. They've issued warrants for Drake's arrest and everyone working for him." Jack looked at Black Tom. "Including you." Black Tom spat in the dirt but said nothing. "So Drake won't be getting this gold?" Rose said. "Nobody's getting this gold until the legal claims are sorted out," Jack corrected. "But since you have your father's map, can prove your identity as his heir, and have witnesses who can testify to his ownership of the mine, I'd say your claim is pretty solid." Rose felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It wasn't over yet. There would be legal proceedings, paperwork, probably disputes from Drake's lawyers. But the hardest part was done. She'd found her father's treasure and protected it from those who would have stolen it. 3 days later, back in Silver Peak, Rose sat in the sheriff's office with Jack, Daniel, Sarah, her ankle now properly set and bandaged, and surprisingly Black Tom Blackwell himself. The gunfighter was in handcuffs, awaiting transport to San Francisco to face charges. But Jack had convinced him to tell what he knew about Michael McKenna's disappearance in exchange for a recommendation for leniency at his trial. "I'll tell you what I know," Black Tom said, "but it ain't much and you ain't gonna like it." "Tell us anyway," Rose said. She needed to know what had happened to her father, even if the truth was painful. Black Tom leaned back in his chair. 5 years ago, Solomon Drake heard rumors about a prospector named Samuel Crow who'd made a big strike near Silver Peak. Drake was already building his mining empire, buying up claims and eliminating competition. He sent men to find Crow and make him an offer, sell the claim or face consequences. But Crow was smart. He'd anticipated trouble. He'd already hidden his gold and split up the map. When Drake's men found him, he refused to sell. There was a fight. "A Paiute man," he nodded to Daniel, "your father, I'm guessing, was killed." McKenna was wounded but escaped into the wilderness. Drake's men tracked him for days, but he managed to lose them in the mountains. After that, Black Tom shrugged. Nobody knows what happened to him. Could have died from his wounds. Could have started a new life somewhere else. Drake spent years trying to find him, but Michael McKenna vanished like smoke. Rose felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. Her father had been brave to the end, had protected his secret and his family even at the cost of his life. She would never see him again, never hear his voice or feel his embrace. But she could honor his memory by doing what he'd wanted, keeping the gold safe and using it wisely. "There's one more thing," Black Tom said. "Drake won't give up easy. Even if I'm going to prison, he'll send others. He's obsessed with that gold mine. You need to be careful, Miss Rose." "Let him try," Jack said firmly. "Rose has the law on her side now, and witnesses to support her claim. Any man Drake sends will be arrested on sight. His criminal empire is crumbling and he knows it." After Black Tom was led away to his cell, Rose turned to the others. "I want to do something good with this gold. Not just keep it for myself." "What did you have in mind?" Jack asked. "First, I want to make sure Sarah and Daniel are taken care of. Daniel's father died protecting my father's secret. They deserve a share of the gold, at least 20%. Sarah started to protest, but Rose held up her hand. "It's not charity. It's justice. Your husband earned it." "Second," Rose continued, "I want to use some of the money to improve Silver Peak. Better schools, a real hospital, maybe a library. My father loved this town and these mountains. He'd want the gold to help people, not just sit in a bank vault." "That's generous of you," Jack said, and Rose could see the approval in his eyes. What about the rest? I'll invest it wisely. Start a legitimate mining operation at my father's claim, hire good workers and pay them fair wages. Show that it's possible to be successful without being ruthless like Solomon Drake. She smiled. And maybe I'll buy the Golden Slipper from Big Pete and turn it into a respectable establishment, a restaurant and dance hall where families can come. You've got it all figured out, Jack observed. Not all of it, but I'm learning. Rose looked at the map pieces spread out on Jack's desk, the 4 sections that had led her on this incredible journey. My father taught me that every rock has a story. Well, this gold has a story too. A story of hard work, sacrifice, friendship between people from different worlds, and a daughter's determination to honor her father's legacy. That story matters more than the gold itself. 6 months later, Silver Peak had changed. The new schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a proper building with glass windows and a bell tower. Children attended classes taught by a real teacher from back east, learning reading, writing, arithmetic, and history. The town had also established a small hospital, staffed by a doctor and 2 nurses, where Sarah Whitehorse worked as a translator and healer, combining modern medicine with traditional Paiute remedies. The library, Rose's personal project, occupied the ground floor of what had once been the Golden Slipper Saloon. She'd purchased the building from Big Pete, who'd taken his money and retired to San Francisco to live with his daughter. The upper floor had been converted into Rose's private residence, modest but comfortable, decorated with books and mementos of her journey. The McKenna Mining Company operated out of a new office on Main Street. Daniel Whitehorse served as the mine foreman, overseeing a crew of 20 men who worked the gold vein Rose's father had discovered. Unlike other mining operations, McKenna Mining paid fair wages, maintained safe working conditions, and provided medical care for injured workers. It wasn't the most profitable mine in Nevada, but it was the most ethical, and that reputation attracted good workers who stayed loyal. Rose no longer danced in saloons. Instead, she'd become something rare in the American West, a female business owner and philanthropist. She attended town council meetings, advocated for workers' rights, and used her influence to push for reforms. Some of the old-timers grumbled about a woman having so much power, but most people respected her. She'd earned it through courage and intelligence. Solomon Drake, meanwhile, had fled to Mexico to avoid prosecution. Federal marshals had raided his San Francisco offices, uncovered evidence of extensive criminal activity, and issued warrants for his arrest on charges ranging from claim jumping to conspiracy to commit murder. His mining empire had collapsed almost overnight, with his assets seized and his accomplices arrested. Black Tom Blackwell had received a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony and was serving time in a territorial prison. On this particular autumn morning, Rose stood on the porch of her library home, watching the town wake up. Miners headed to work, shopkeepers opened their doors, and schoolchildren rushed toward the new schoolhouse. Silver Peak was thriving, growing beyond its rough mining camp origins into a real community. "Morning," a familiar voice said. Rose turned to see Jack Coleman climbing the steps to her porch. He'd taken to stopping by most mornings on his rounds, often staying for coffee and conversation. Their friendship had deepened over the months, though neither had yet acknowledged the unspoken feelings between them. "Morning, Sheriff. Coffee? Please." They sat on the porch, sipping coffee and watching the town. It had become their routine, these quiet morning moments before the day's business began. "I got a letter from the territorial governor," Jack said. "He's coming to Silver Peak next month to officially recognize your father's mining claim and present you with the legal title. It'll be a big ceremony, newspapers, dignitaries, the whole thing." "Do I have to make a speech?" Rose asked with mock horror. Jack laughed. "Afraid so. You're a prominent citizen now. Goes with the territory. I liked it better when I was just a dance hall girl and nobody paid attention to me." "Liar. You love being able to make a difference." Rose smiled. He was right, of course. She did love it, the challenge of building something good, of honoring her father's legacy while creating her own. It was harder than dancing but infinitely more rewarding. "Jack," she said suddenly, "what are you going to do? You can't be sheriff of Silver Peak forever. You're too smart, too capable. You could be a U.S. Marshal, maybe even run for territorial representative." He was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee. "I've had offers, but I like Silver Peak. I like the people here. He paused, then met her eyes. "I like my life here." The moment stretched between them, full of things unsaid. Rose felt her heart beating faster. Before either could speak, Daniel came riding up Main Street at a gallop, unusual for him as he was normally calm and measured. "Rose? Sheriff," he called out. "You need to see this." They hurried down from the porch. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Something's right." Daniel's face was flushed with excitement. "We were working the mine this morning, following a new vein that branched off from the main one. We broke through into a natural cave and Rose, you have to see what we found." 20 minutes later, Rose stood in her father's gold mine, staring at something impossible. The natural cave Daniel's crew had discovered was large, about 30 feet across. And on the wall, someone had painted a message in large letters, using some kind of dark pigment that had survived the years. "To my daughter Rose. If you are reading this, then you found the gold. Well done. I am sorry I could not be there to guide you, but I knew you were smart enough and brave enough to follow the clues. The gold is yours. Use it wisely. Help people. Make the world a little better. I am proud of you. I always have been. I always will be. Your loving father, Michael McKenna." Below the message was a date, September 15, 1872, just 1 week before his disappearance. Rose read the words 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her father had known he was in danger. He'd prepared for the possibility that he might not survive. And he'd left her this message, this final proof of his love and confidence in her. Jack stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder in silent support. Daniel waited respectfully at the cave entrance. The miners had all stopped work, sensing that this was a sacred moment. "He knew," Rose whispered. "He knew I'd come looking. He believed in me." "Of course he did," Jack said gently. "Anyone who knows you believes in you." Rose wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders. Her father had given her an incredible gift, not just gold but purpose and direction. He'd challenged her to be better, to use her resources to help others, to make a difference. She would not let him down. The ceremony for the official recognition of the McKenna mining claim took place in November, on a clear, cold day with snow dusting the mountain peaks. The territorial governor arrived with his entourage, along with newspaper reporters from San Francisco, Sacramento, and even New York. They gathered in Silver Peak's new town hall, another project funded by Rose's Gold, where the governor presented Rose with the legal title to her father's mine and made a speech about hard work, perseverance, and the American dream. Rose gave her own speech, shorter and less flowery than the governor's, thanking those who had helped her: Jack, Daniel, Sarah, Big Pete, and the citizens of Silver Peak who had accepted a dance hall girl as one of their own. The reporters wrote enthusiastically about the gold mine heiress and the mystery of the lost treasure. Within weeks, Rose McKenna's story had spread across the country. She received letters from young women who'd been inspired by her courage, from businessmen wanting to invest in her mining company, from historians wanting to document her father's life. Some of the attention was unwelcome. Fortune hunters showed up in Silver Peak, hoping to strike it rich like Michael McKenna. But most left disappointed. The truth was that finding gold required more than luck. It required knowledge, hard work, and the kind of persistence that had driven Michael McKenna and now drove his daughter. Rose used her newfound fame to advocate for causes she believed in: better working conditions for miners, education for women, fair treatment of Native Americans. She funded scholarships for promising students, including several Paiute children whom she sent to schools back east with the blessing of their families. She became a vocal opponent of monopolistic practices in mining, making powerful enemies among the robber barons but winning respect from working people. Sarah Whitehorse became Rose's closest friend and advisor. The old woman's wisdom and knowledge of the land proved invaluable in managing the mine sustainably, ensuring that their operations didn't damage the environment or deplete resources for future generations. Sarah also served as a bridge between the white community of Silver Peak and the local Paiute bands, helping to ease tensions and build understanding. Daniel eventually married a Paiute woman named Morning Star, and they built a house near the mine where they raised 3 children. He continued to work as foreman of McKenna Mining, earning a reputation as one of the finest mining engineers in Nevada. He never forgot that his position came about because 2 men from different worlds, his father and Michael McKenna, had chosen friendship over prejudice. As for Jack Coleman, he remained sheriff of Silver Peak for 3 more years. Then, on a spring evening in 1880, he finally worked up the courage to ask Rose McKenna to marry him. They were sitting on her porch as they had countless times before, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Jack had rehearsed his speech for weeks, but when the moment came, all his careful words fled. "Rose," he said simply, "I love you. Have for years. Will you marry me?" Rose looked at him, this good man who had risked his life to help her, who had believed in her when others hadn't, who had stood beside her through every challenge. She thought about what her father had written, "Make the world a little better." Jack Coleman made her world better, every single day. "Yes," she said. They were married in June in a ceremony that the whole town attended. Sarah Whitehorse blessed their union in both English and Paiute. Big Pete came all the way from San Francisco to give Rose away. Daniel served as Jack's best man. Even some of Black Tom Blackwell's former gang members, now reformed and working honest jobs, showed up to wish them well. Rose wore a dress of ivory silk, simple but elegant. Around her neck was the locket her mother had given her, the one that had held the map piece, a reminder of the journey that had brought her here. Jack wore his best suit, though he insisted on keeping his badge on. "Once a lawman, always a lawman," he said with a smile. After the wedding, Jack resigned as sheriff and joined Rose in running McKenna Mining. Together they expanded the business, not just mining gold but also establishing general stores, a freight company, and eventually a small railroad spur that connected Silver Peak to the main line. They had 3 children, a daughter they named Bridget after Rose's mother, a son named Michael after Rose's father, and another daughter named Sarah after their dear friend. The children grew up hearing stories about their grandfather's adventures, about hidden maps and lost treasures, about courage and determination in the face of danger. Many years later, when Rose was an old woman, she would sit on the porch of the large house she and Jack had built on the hill overlooking Silver Peak, and tell her grandchildren about the summer she discovered her father's gold. "It wasn't really about the gold," she would say. "The gold was just rocks, metal, valuable, yes, but not the most important thing." "Then what was important, Grandma?" the children would ask. "The journey," Rose would explain. "The courage to follow your dreams even when it's dangerous. The friends who help you along the way. The choice to use what you have, whether it's gold or talent or knowledge, to make life better for others. That's what matters." By the time Rose McKenna Coleman passed away in 1925, at the age of 71, she had become a legend. Newspapers across the country ran obituaries celebrating the dance hall girl who built an empire. Historians studied her life as an example of frontier entrepreneurship. Women's rights activists pointed to her as proof that women could succeed in business and politics. But in Silver Peak, people remembered her differently. They remembered a young woman who had danced at the Golden Slipper and made every partner feel graceful. They remembered how she'd risked everything to find her father's treasure and then used it to build a better community. They remembered her kindness, her generosity, her strength. The McKenna mine continued to operate for another 40 years, finally closing in 1965 when the gold ran out. By then, it had produced over $5 million worth of gold and provided good jobs for 3 generations of miners. The mine entrance was preserved as a historical site, with a plaque telling the story of Michael McKenna and his daughter Rose. The old Spanish mission where the treasure vault had been hidden became a tourist attraction. Visitors could tour the ruins and see the crypt where Rose had made her final stand against Black Tom and his gang. Local guides told exaggerated versions of the story, adding elements that never happened, but the core truth remained. A young woman had been brave enough to fight for what was rightfully hers. In the town of Silver Peak itself, Rose's library still stood, now called the McKenna Memorial Library. It housed not just books but also artifacts from Rose's life. Her father's compass, the map pieces, now safely preserved behind glass, photographs of the mine and the people who worked it, and the original message Michael McKenna had painted on the cave wall, carefully removed and mounted for display. Every year on the anniversary of Rose's discovery of the treasure vault, the town held the Gold Days Festival, featuring reenactments of the famous events, mining competitions and historical lectures. Children dressed up as Rose, Jack, Daniel, and even Black Tom, playing out the story that had become part of Silver Peak's identity. The old-timers would gather at the festival and share their own memories of Rose McKenna. How she had personally paid for old Johnny Hart's medical care when he was sick. How she had donated books to start the library, then spent hours reading to children who couldn't yet read themselves. How she had stood up to corrupt politicians and monopolistic businessmen, never backing down even when threatened. She was tough as nails but kind as summer rain, they'd say. Never forgot where she came from, never stopped caring about ordinary folks. And on quiet evenings, when the desert wind whistled through the mountains around Silver Peak, some people swore they could still hear the faint sound of piano music drifting from where the Golden Slipper once stood, a reminder of the dance hall girl who became a legend, not because she found gold but because she knew what to do with it.